It's been a fascinating ride with Premier PRM. We started in 2017 as an oil project in the known oil fields of the west side of Kern County. So for those that are not familiar, the west side of Kern County, which is in the south central portion of the state, has prolific oil and gas reserves that have been developed for 130 plus years. And at one point, California supplied approximately 10% of the world's oil. It was a major reason why we were able to supply fuel to the Allied forces to win World War II. And there's just a rich history of oil production in the central part of California.
Welcome to Geothermal Unleashed, where we will explore the cutting edge of geothermal energy. I'm Elizabeth Cambre from the Vallourec New Energies team, and I'm here to help educate and document geothermal's rise in the global energy transition. Today, I'm delighted to welcome Mike Umbro, who is the co-founder from Premier Resource Management. He also is the founder and CEO of the Californians for Energy and Science, which is a nonprofit for education of energy, the environment, and economics. Mike, thank you for joining me today. I have heard you speak at a number of different conferences, and I think you're such a well-polished and fun speaker to listen to. So I'm very excited to have you on the podcast today. So can we start by you giving us an introduction of your background, what you do at Premier Resource Management, and how you became involved in the geothermal space?
Yes, thank you for setting this up, Elizabeth. It's
Yeah.
fun to be doing this, and I know we see each other at events, and I learned so much from you and your team as well. And so we're just trying to educate on the nonprofit side. We're trying to educate at the student level, the high school level, the collegiate level, on what's happening in California, the opportunities to unleash local energy, and a subset of that. And what I'm focused on is geothermal and geologic thermal energy storage. As a developer, that's the project we're developing. And I'm just a born and raised Californian that fell into energy. I don't have any family ties. I'm just really passionate about lowering energy costs, providing affordable, reliable, clean power ultimately to the people of California. And I just again fell into it via a banking background and finance background, and now here developing a project in West Kern County and advocating through the nonprofit for sane energy policies in California.
Awesome. Okay, so let's talk specific about what you're doing at Premier Resource Management. So it's my understanding that you are in the space of geothermal storage, but you're coupling
Mm-hmm.
that with the co-production of hydrocarbons. Can you talk a
Yes.
little bit about your work with Premier?
Yeah, it's been a fascinating ride with Premier PRM. We started in 2017 as an oil project in the known oil fields of the west side of Kern County. So for those that are not familiar, the west side of Kern County, which is in the central, kind of south central portion of the state, has prolific oil and gas reserves that have been developed for 130 plus years. And at one point, California supplied approximately 10% of the world's oil. And it was a major reason why we were able to supply fuel to the Allied forces to win World War II. And there's just a rich history of oil production in the central part of California. So we started as an oil project. State policies really began to signal to the market that oil and gas projects were not wanted in California. This is 2 years after we started in 2019 and 2020. Fast forward to today, and you have almost no permits for new drilling happening in oil and gas. So around 2022, we said, well, what can we do with this project? We know that 70% of the oil in California is thermally enhanced. So it's a heavy oil, and we're using natural gas to fire a steam generator to put heat down hole to improve or enhance oil recovery. So taking known thermodynamic principles that have been proven over 70 years in California's oil patch, and then saying, how can we convert the oil reservoir to a geothermal resource? So what we're doing in very simple explanation is we're taking concentrated solar troughs, so parabolic troughs. They're about 18 feet tall. They concentrate sunlight onto a receiver tube that sits right in front of the trough. That's heated to about 700 degrees, a working fluid in that receiver tube. That goes to a heat exchanger. We bring up reservoir. The oil is a byproduct. We sell the oil. We take that out in the first phase of moving those fluids. Then we're left with just a brackish water from the reservoir that is heated at the heat exchanger to 500 degrees Fahrenheit, and then we re-inject it in injection wells. And so over time, we heat our oil reservoir or our geologic formation to about 500 degrees. And once we're hot, as we know in the geothermal industry, the earth is an amazing insulator, an amazing source of heat naturally in hydrothermal processes. But in our process, we're effectively making a synthetic geothermal reservoir with sunlight. And we're using the oil reservoir because we know we have hydrocarbons trapped there over geologic time, which basically means we have a container that we can heat up and that we can trap that thermal energy. So once we're hot, we then have a third closed loop where we dispatch hot brackish water to another heat exchanger. And on the other end of that is a traditional steam turbine power generation set. So we're making demand aligned, dispatchable geothermal power from an oil reservoir. So it's been a fascinating ride the past 7, 8 years now that we've been developing this project.
That's wonderful. So, okay, so you turned towards looking at the geothermal component in 2022.
Yes.
So now we are in 2025, and you must have experienced some challenges being in the California landscape, trying to get this project off the ground. What has your experience been like, and what are the biggest challenges that you face?
It's been frustrating, rewarding, educational. It's been everything. Ultimately, I feel very fortunate that we've gone this route to geotest, which is the acronym we call geologic thermal energy storage. So geotest, I believe, really gives our project a much longer runway. The hydrocarbons will be produced. They will then be gone for most purposes. We're going to be ultimately just a clean power project. 70% of the project revenue is clean power sales, and that is a very long lived project where we can manage that reservoir for 70 to 100 years. So the process has been, on the policy side in California, extremely frustrating. Policies in Sacramento have really clamped down on drilling activity and drilling permits and the ability to maintain oil and gas operations at an economic price point, the ability to develop new resources, new technologies like ours is extremely challenging when you're doing so in an oil and gas environment. It's hard to, I think, gain that social license or that trust from policymakers that feel like anything to do with oil is bad and there's nothing better to do than to shut down the industry. So that's been very frustrating. However, we've been partnered with 3 national laboratories: National Renewable Energy Lab, Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, and Idaho National Lab, and the DOE Geothermal Technologies Office. And that's been extremely rewarding because we were awarded a $6 million grant to demonstrate this hybridization of concentrated solar and reservoir storage. We've been able to work with the labs and share knowledge and really align federally under a Biden administration. And then we have a Trump administration coming in that wants to support geothermal. And so what I love about what we're doing is it's totally bipartisan. It supports the legacy oil and gas jobs and provides new jobs for those same workers doing the same types of jobs they were doing. So we're not proposing that we're retraining people. We're just giving them more opportunities. And then the people of California, what do the people need? They need clean, affordable, reliable power. And that's what we're trying to give them. So, and by the way, we're still the #2 fossil fuel consumer in the country. So we still need those fossil fuels. And so all of those things make it exciting every day to wake up and work on those challenges.
Awesome. Okay,
Mhm.
so I saw that you've got an event that you're participating in that's coming up. It's the California Energy Innovation Open House, and that's coming up in
Mhm.
June. What's on the agenda for this? How are you participating?
So we'll be live in the studios of California Insider and Epic Times, which has really broadened their distribution nationally. And they're focused on solutions, talking about solutions to California's energy crisis. We have multiple fronts of this crisis. We have a refining capacity crisis as refineries are shutting down and announcing closures. We have the highest gasoline prices in the country. We have the highest utility rates in the country. And I'm talking lower 48. I'm kind of stripping out Hawaii and Alaska on the utility side. But we do have the highest gasoline prices regardless of where you live in the United States. So we're just focused on bringing energy leaders from the oil and gas producers, from utilities, from folks like us with innovative projects trying to bring innovation to California in a format where we can record the conversations, we can distribute those conversations and just share with the people of California and folks across the country there's solutions to these energy problems, and the solution is to embrace the innovation, to streamline the permitting, to invite capital to invest in California, and just talking about all the solutions we have and all the opportunities rather than focus on the negativity, which is how do we afford to live in California. It's very difficult. So that's what that event is about. And so we'll have a lot of our members from Californians for Energy and Science there, and a live studio audience, and just having fun and trying to get the message out on unleashing energy in California.
I love that. Well,
Hmm.
next week we're both going to Capitol Hill to advocate for geothermal with Geothermal Rising's Capitol Hill Day. Are you excited for this? What are you planning? Do you have specific things that you want to communicate to representatives and senators that you'll be meeting with?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm super excited. I know I love seeing every time I go to a geothermal rising event, or it's just amazing how well organized they are. They put you in the right room with the right people, and it's really an inclusive group. I mean, like we've talked about, I came into geothermal in 2022, and there's been no pushback from the geothermal community on embracing our hybridization of oil and gas reservoirs to geothermal. It's just a great group. So yeah, I'm excited. I think policy wise, I think there's topics to touch on with the EPA, with the DOE, with the Bureau of Land Management. I think there's such tremendous you and we all talk about it in geothermal. There's just such tremendous opportunity, and then taking that to both the agencies and the legislators to find ways to bring projects online. That's my main focus is how do we build projects of all kinds? And I think that aligns with those three agencies and the Energy Dominance Council, which I love, and Geothermal Unleashed. I think just we're all rallying around the term unleash
Yeah.
because there is so much potential to unleash. So um, I'm super excited. Have you done the GRC day in
This
DC?
is going to be my first time. I am
Okay.
super excited. I will prepare in advance. I know they've kind of guided us on some talking points, but I will do my homework so that I show
Yeah.
up and I can have impact. I think that's my biggest goal with this is to really try to do what I can to say the right things to, in the presence of these senators and reps. So I'm
Hmm.
excited.
Yeah. It's gonna be
Yeah,
fun.
it will be fun. Okay, so I am able to keep abreast with what you're doing because you send
Uh,
out a email that kind of
yeah.
some updates, which I think is great. You've got a slide deck, and by the way, can our listeners subscribe to your email?
Yes, our website is three words, energyandscience.com. No spaces, no dashes, just energyandscience.com. There's a place that they can click to just give us their information, their email, and then I can put them on our
Wonderful.
distribution list. Yeah.
I
So
will.
that slide deck is just trying to educate folks.
Wonderful. I will include the link in the notes
Hmm.
for this podcast. So let's talk about it.
Great.
You call
Yeah.
it Unleash California Energy. So, what is your call
Yes.
to action in California with what you present in your Unleash California Energy messaging?
I think the ultimate call to action is to help the people of California or the United States. I mean, the California's energy crisis affects everybody. We import 40% of the nation's imports through our ports. So if the product's moving through California, it's moving on our diesel, it's moving on our gasoline, it's refrigerated with our electrons, you name it. If it's got to get through California, you're going to pay for the energy to move it through there. So our call to action is really to recognize those fundamental facts that we are the fourth largest economy in the world. We do consume over 550 million barrels of crude oil a year through our refining complex. That's 1.8 million barrels a day. And then looking at the rich history of California, whether, we produce more than 70% of the country's geothermal power. We have a history where we and our state and Alaska not too long ago in the 80s and 90s were supplying almost 100% of California's crude oil. We were energy independent between California and Alaska. And fast forward just 25, 30 years, we're not energy independent. We're dependent on OPEC for our crude oil. Approximately 60 plus percent of our oil now comes through our ports on tanker ships that spew pollution into the environment. And what we try to do is just educate on what that means. If we're not producing local oil, if we're not producing more geothermal, if we're not producing our own energy, it has to come from somewhere. And so the call to action is really to get the policymakers in Sacramento to recognize, not just with their words, but with their actions and with their laws, that local energy is the best source of energy for the environment. It's the best for our wallets, our bank accounts. It's the cheapest, and it's the most reliable. California also imports 30% of our electricity. Just our electricity, 30% is imported. So we're you cannot run this state by importing everything that you need. And that's really the kind of the foundation that we're trying to get across to people, that importing everything is not sustainable. And we're realizing that now with the highest energy prices in the country. So that's the call to action. Just, let's recognize the facts and get the policymakers on board with all of us little operators that are trying to bring projects online.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's interesting. California is home to many geothermal resources, and
Hmm.
California is abundant in this type of renewable energy. Um, Now, there are geothermal projects there, but let's go back to this question where we were talking about how challenging it is.
Hmm.
What does it look like to get a permit for geothermal in California? You did
Oh
mention
boy.
permitting. Yeah.
How long do we go here? Um, it's the hardest thing I've ever done professionally.
Why? Why?
Well, number one, it's politicized for us, and really geothermal in general. It's politicized. Enhanced geothermal systems. You've got to hydraulically fracture or hydraulically shear a well, whatever you want to call it. You need well bore stimulation treatments. Those have been outlawed by Governor Newsom via executive order. So bringing new technologies on is very difficult when we have sweeping executive orders that stymie wellbore stimulations, for example. Now, there are carve outs for geothermal in that executive order, but
Oh,
what that fails to recognize is the pumping companies, whether it's a Halliburton or Schlumberger, anybody that's on these frac jobs, the equipment's gone. If you
yeah.
wipe out the frac fleet from the state, it's not there for the geothermal resource. So that's where we talk about. I know you talk about a lot about this, just the crossover between oil and gas and geothermal. So just kind of setting that foundation, that makes it very difficult if you've got an existing project to continue to
Mhm.
have wellbore stimulation treatments, whatever those may be. it's hard to get those permits today. It's hard to get a permit to do anything with a well bore in California if it's not plug and abandonment. So that's a very daunting, just kind of proposition in and of itself. If you're an operator of either one, oil and gas or geothermal, I can't get a permit unless I'm plugging a well. That's what you're faced with. So for us, we started in 2017. We still do not have UIC. So underground injection control is a process that ultimately goes through our state agency, CalGEM, to the water quality control boards, to Cal EPA. That whole process can take you a decade to get a UIC. So your entire project, if you're dealing with geothermal or oil and gas, again, when you're dealing with massive volumes of water that you're trying to produce hot water from a reservoir. For us, it's at 1,300 feet, fairly shallow. And then you're trying to put that water right back into that same reservoir cleaner than it came out before because we're producing it, we're removing the contaminant, which in our case is the hydrocarbon, and then we're putting it back down cleaner than before. That can still take you 10 years. We still don't have our UIC project approval letter after 7 years. So just getting a project with UIC will take you a decade. And then not to mention the fact that drilling permits have gone from around 3,000 new drills happening in the state of California every year to like last year was like 28, not 2028, but 28. So you've got this blanket shutdown on drilling, and that's killing the industry. So without drilling, without injection, you don't have a project. And that's an emergency, particularly when the state of California signals with policies that we want more geothermal, we want more clean power, we need it, but there's a disconnect here because if we can't permit it, you Sacramento are never going to get that power. So it's the
Wow.
hardest thing I've ever done.
So,
And
I mean, has your permit moved at all, or is it still like you've been working on it since 2017, 7 years into this? Have you seen any progress with it? Do you get
it's
updates, or is it a black
it's
hole?
it's yeah, it's part black hole, it's part unknown, because giving I'm trying to be someone that gives the benefit of the doubt to the policymakers and saying, okay, they recognize there were some environmental concerns they had, so I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt that they just want to clean up the legacy issues, and then we'll get back to responsible permit uh, processing, which I think is really happening, and it's being driven by the refining crisis that I mentioned and the price crisis that we're having, whether it's electrons or at the gasoline pump. So I think yes, it's moving. We talk to the agencies a lot, whether it's our CalGEM, which is our state agency that oversees drilling permits and some of the UIC permit process. They'll engage with us. However, I like to relate it. If we were doing this in Texas, this would be days, if not weeks, to get these permits. In California, it's years, if not decades. So, what I hear from the EPA, from the BLM, from the DOE, and the Energy Dominance Council, they recognize that these state policies in California are driving this crisis, and they want to find a way to reform this whole process where we still protect the environment, absolutely, but we get projects online. So I'm very encouraged by what's happening at the federal level. But it's still, if you're dealing with investors like we are, there's no way I can say, yes, by this date, we are going to have our drilling permits, or yes, by this date, we're going to have our UIC. All we can say is it's not a matter of if, but when. And investors don't like to hear that. And I think that's the importance
Yeah.
of conversations like this with you and sharing that across the country, that if we want to unleash these resources, we need to unleash certainty around permit timelines and allow investors to feel good about putting money into these resource plays that take many years to bring online. Now, the beauty of it on the flip side is once you bring it online, you've got a 70 to 100-year project in our case with geotest. As long as you're maintaining the well bores and managing the reservoir, you've got a very long-lived project. So on the flip side, that's very encouraging for developers and capital providers.
Okay, so I want to ask a question.
Yeah.
What is it like with the sentiment of being a hydrocarbon producer commingled with geothermal?
I love it's interesting. It's interesting with the oil legacy oil and gas
Yeah.
folks. I keep saying you all need to be talking about geotests in California because it's the future. It aligns with Sacramento. It extends the life of your asset. It gives you another revenue stream, which is arguably more valuable in a low oil market, a low oil price environment. Clean electrons in California are at a premium. So for those three reasons, I'm really trying to say to the whole industry in California, come on board. There's room for more. And that kind of segues into what it's like with the geothermal community. That's the vibe I get from the geothermal community. Oh, you're in oil and gas and you want to develop a new technology? Come on into geothermal, geothermal rising, whatever organization that we're working with, either if it's a private company or that fantastic organization, it's come on in. We need it all. And then federally, it's we need it all. So I've never been more excited about, as frustrating as it is to get a project online, it's so exciting and refreshing to have the geothermal component be the focus. And the hybridization of taking something, and it's something that I think is really trending nationally, that people are realizing the Green New Deal, so to speak, is not working out like we planned, and it can really swing based on who's in office. But if you're dealing with, you know, economics that work regardless of federal grant money or regardless of subsidy, which ours is economic, geotest is economic, but that's the beauty of it. The hydrocarbons pay for the expense of the surface infrastructure up front early in the project. So there's so many positive attributes that I'm super excited about it.
Yeah. Okay, I love this. So I'm going to ask one more question. We've got
Yeah.
time for one more.
Yeah.
But I want to learn more about what you're doing with the Californians for energy and science. So
Yeah.
when and why did you decide
hmm
to launch this nonprofit?
So we launched in November of 22, which was kind of the depth of our despair, not getting permits, the full shutdown in California for oil and gas projects, for refineries, for our electricity bills have been soaring as is national news coverage. So we thought, what can we do? I'm a finance investment banker by trade. I saw the writing on the wall that if you don't have projects, you don't have deals. So there's no future for my services. So what can I do? And the nonprofit was something that obviously is not financially lucrative for me personally, but very rewarding personally to work to educate the consumers about energy affordability, reliability. So what we're really trying to do is get on campus. And so we're trying to get last night I was at the Taft Oil Tech Academy at the Taft Union High School. Most people have never been to Taft, California, but group of about 100 students or more, maybe it's 200 students, that Fred and Barbara Holmes, an oil and gas mom and pop, they pay for all of this. And they take their success in Kern County and they pour it back into the community. And so we see that at the ground level in our community in Kern County. And what we're trying to do through our nonprofit is to spread awareness that, if you have economic vibrancy by independent entrepreneurs, you have people that are pumping resources back into the youth, back into the job market, back into education. And it's a model that works without government handouts, and it's a model that empowers people to feel good about what they do. So that's what we're trying to educate people on, that these companies that are doing good in the community, they exist, and they better the environment, and they better the atmosphere for their people to thrive. And so we're on campus at UC Berkeley. I've lectured at Harvard. I've lectured at University of North Dakota. I've lectured at University of Southern California. We're just trying to share with students the message that if we shut down our energy systems, and you're at one of these top universities studying whatever you're studying in engineering, what are you going to do when you get out of college? What are you going to do if there's no permits and there's no projects and there's no jobs? What are you going to do? And that's the question that really hits home with kids. And we've had people say, "Oh, why would you go to these liberal universities? They're just trying to shut down drilling. Let's just broadly drilling." And that's not the case. These students, they know that there's much more to this conversation. And so that's our real goal with Californians for Energy and Science, is to have a space for those conversations to take place, and to hold events across different campuses. Our June 13th California Insider, just have open forums for people to discuss these topics, and find solutions. More than anything, I think we need to turn the conversation away from complaining about the lack of permits to presenting the path forward and how we're going to solve these problems.
Wonderful. Well,
Mm-hmm.
you have got a lot of energy. You're doing a lot of wonderful things for this space. The geothermal industry is lucky to have you as
Thank
a
you. I appreciate
voice.
that.
Yeah.
They're lucky to have you too, because we see each other everywhere. I mean, you're traveling a lot. I'm traveling a lot. It's really cool. If people are listening to this and they're not involved, they need to get involved with geothermal to help us unleash this
100%.
industry.
100%. Well, I want to
Yeah.
thank you. And I
Thank
want to
you.
thank the listeners for joining us on this episode of Geothermal Unleashed. I hope today's discussion has sparked new insights and deepened your understanding of the geothermal industry's incredible potential. Until next time, keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible, and let's continue working together to unleash the full potential of geothermal. Thank you.